Now to breaking news we told you about at the top of our newscast. A major announcement from the White House sure to spark a political debate.
At a certain point, I've just concluded that for me personally, it is important for me to go ahead and affirm that I think same-sex couples should be able to get married.
This is a clear assault on the sanctity of marriage, and I am not the only one who knows it. So does Pastor Robert Jeffress of First Baptist Dallas.
By embracing same-sex marriage, President Obama has really contradicted the Jesus that he says he follows.
And I, right now, would like to read to you what the Jesus said about homosexuality. I'd like to, but he never said anything about it. Yeah.
As the endless culture war in America rages on, new lines are drawn and new battles are chosen. The fight for marriage equality has two distinct sides: those who view marriage as a right and those who view marriage as a privilege. In 1996, Congress passed the Defense of Marriage Act, or DOMA, by an overwhelming majority in both houses, and it was signed into law by President Clinton. Since its passing, DOMA has been struck down and upheld in federal courts several times as it makes its way to the Supreme Court. In the 19th century, the founder of the Mormon Church, Joseph Smith, tried to bring back the long-lost traditional marriage practice of polygamy in Western culture.
I agree with 3,000 years of recorded history. Marriage is an institution between a man and a woman.
The sacrament of marriage was based on a man and woman, has been for 3,000 years, is at the core of our civilization, and is something worth protecting and upholding.
Several different marriage practices exist within the text of the Bible, all of which were legitimate in that time and culture. However, the practice of marriage predates Christianity and Judaism.
So it's a little bit difficult to say exactly when the institution of marriage came about, historically, or prehistorically especially. Historically, we have some records, but a good guess would be about 50,000 years ago. Marriage is pretty well a cultural universal, but the particular form of marriage in a particular society, a particular subculture or subgroup of a society can vary, and it can change extremely quickly, even over a single generation.
It wasn't until the late 18th century that what we now think of as the essence of love and marriage, going together like a horse and carriage, it became respectable to encourage people to make their choices. For thousands of, the reason that people were so historically suspicious about love is that marriage for thousands of years had very little to do with the individual relationship between a man and a woman. And the more I study marriage, the more I'm convinced that the invention of marriage had nothing at all to do with the relationship between the man and the woman. Marriage was invented to get in-laws. It was a way of turning strangers into relatives, of making peace. That's why the word for wife in many languages means peace weaver.
Marriage is how you make an alliance, or one way of making an alliance with another family group.
Marguerite de Valois. Acceptes-tu pour époux Henri de Bourbon, roi de Navarre? Marguerite de Valois, acceptes-tu pour... Au nom du Père, au nom du Fils et au nom de la Sainte Église, je vous déclare mariés.
If you think about what marriage is doing, all right, it's creating alliances, it's creating relations of descent, It's regulating sexual access between people. It's assigning responsibility for child care, and it's distributing economic labor. And those are things that need to be done. And marriage is a powerful way for accomplishing those tasks. It is also a powerful, publicly sanctioned social construct that accomplishes a number of other things besides just having kids.
Every culture in the world that we know of knows that there's such a thing as romantic love. But in most cultures and through most of history, this is not an emotion that is celebrated, especially in conjunction with marriage.
The primary purpose of marriage is still, no matter how many times they want to deny it and curse it, the primary purpose of marriage is still the propagation, the procreation of the human race.
You are making and procreation is the only rational basis for the heterosexual marriage? Or is it?
It is the emphasis, yes. Yes.
Is there any other rational basis?
It ties in with tradition and the management of tradition.
The legislature obviously could not constitutionally redefine marriage to mean only marriage between people of the same race. Correct? So it's not a marriage unless the two people are of the same race?
No, of course not.
Is there any real difference between a definition and a substantive limitation? I mean, isn't the state in substance saying only people of the opposite sex can get married?
So traditional marriage depends very much on the politics of representation going on and what kind of social relationship the person talking about the traditional marriage is trying to legitimize.
And you know what's fascinating is that immediately social conservatives of the day, defenders of what was then the traditional marriage, political and economic convenience, were absolutely horrified. They said, oh my gosh, if you make marriage about love, how are we going to get the right people to marry? You know, if my son can say, I don't love her, you know, stupid reason like that. How are we going to prevent the wrong people from marrying? Today, the debate is, well, you know, gays and lesbians are saying, well, if marriage is about love and sexual satisfaction and it no longer has to be about gender roles, why can't we have access to marriage? In the 18th century, they were afraid that poor people would want access to marriage.
I mean, if we think of family structures as adaptable and as helping people out, whatever the social or economic or political conditions might be, if you just think about the diversity we've got in the world right now of kinship structures and marriage patterns. So clearly there's been a lot of shifting and changing, and it's going on now, and it's likely to continue into the future.